We will be covering all of the big head races that are coming up in the spring. So we'll be covering School's Head, Bet's Head, Head of the River, and Women's Head of the River. And we will do our best to make sure that everything is covered. Any questions, please do make sure to ask. Just admitting a few more people. Right. So we'll be covering, most importantly, the sort of before and after the race. During the race, of course, we will cover what we think is the best racing line, and that's obviously up for discussion to some extent. So we'll cover what we think, and I'm sure where Morgan and I will slightly disagree at certain points, which will be perfect for you. But most importantly, we want to make sure that this is safe. So we want to make sure that prior to the race and after the race, you know exactly what to expect, what's going on, things to look out for. So progressing to the start and being in the marshalling area, being safe obviously at all points, but really making sure that you're safe around objects in the river. There are so many other crews out on the water, so making sure that you're really keeping a lookout for everyone. And then what happens during the race as well. And then finally, we'll cover the steering.
So I think a big thing that we want to get across before we kind of crack on and go through further bits of information is you must read the rules, and you must read the rules specific to the event at which you're racing. So if you're racing in the women's head and you're racing in the head of the river, then you need to make sure you read the rules for both, because there are going to be very subtle differences for them, and you have to be able to understand those. This is not an opportunity, your attendance for this webinar or watching the webinar and the recording, this is not an opportunity for you to go, yeah, I've covered that, that's all done. Like, you have to read the rules. We don't have enough time to really go into the nitty gritty. And it's so important that you've read them and you understand them, because they are there so that we can be safe and everyone can have a fair race. That's all we want out of this. So please make sure that hits home, that even though you've sat here and you've listened and you've asked some questions, you still must read the rules of the race that you're in.
Absolutely. Still some people coming into the waiting room, so sorry, occasionally a bit delayed on the
Okay, so the first things we're kind of going to cover is about your progression to the start and how that leads you into the marshalling area. And I think it's really important first for you to think about, where are you boating from and what does that look like? So for the majority of places, it's probably going to be a wet dock. So you're going to be needing to get into the water. We also need to make sure that you know what part or what stretch of the river you are on. If you're boating down at Putney, you're going to have to go the full length of the track to get to the start line, and probably even more, because you're going to go through the start and then you'll be asked to turn and progress into the racing fairway. So for crews that are boating from Putney, you're going to need at least an hour to progress to the start. You might even need more than that. So think logically about the speed of your crew. You're progressing against the stream. You've got to cover at least 7 kilometers, probably more. Like, have a think about that. Plan your timings for the day. Even prior to the point at which your boat touches the water, you're going to need to get through the queue of boats trying to get onto the water. So that's really important for you to consider. This whole timings of the day, that stretches right out. So from the moment that you arrive, you need to be thinking about, okay, what time do I need to put the boat on the water? What time am I getting in the queue? How long do I need to get to the start? I need to be in my marshalling position safely and comfortably at least 15 minutes before the race starts. And I would say check on each of the respective head races websites as to what time you need to be there, because that could be different information depending on the race that you're on, and you have to have read that information to know. Having a think about what side of the river in which you're boating on. If you're boating from somewhere near Hammersmith, but you're on the Middlesex side, so that might be Fulham Reach, you're going to have to cross over to get into the right part, to get to the Surrey side of the navigation ways to come and progress towards the start line. So having a think about those things. There will be crews rowing in the racing line, not racing won't have started, or they might be racing. You don't know what's going on. So we're listening to the marshals and the umpires who are going to be there to allow you the time and space to complete the maneuvers that you need to do. So they're not there to spoil your day or make things harder. They actually make it a lot easier. And if you're able to communicate clearly with them and acknowledge when you've understood what they've said, or ask them to confirm, then you're going to have the best opportunity to have a clear shot and a clear progression to your marshalling position, to your start line, to have completed your warm-up. Now, if we talk about your warming up, you can't do any bursts or any firm work, any full pressure in the marshalling area. So my understanding, and you need to double check with the rules, because we all make mistakes. Once you get to the Chiswick steps and the progressing towards the start line, from that moment in time, the crossover, so the point where crews on the Surrey side have to cross to Middlesex, you're entering the marshalling area. Now, what's very handy is there's usually a marshalling launch there that will tell you that you are entering the marshalling area. You then know you cannot be doing bursts or starts or any firm pressure through that period. So you need to have a think about, what warming up do I need to do? Am I going to have time to do bursts? Where would I fit those in on the track? And just have a little look at a map. If you've got a map of the Tideway, you can then start to plan out where you're going to do different things. Also be prepared to probably do a bit more warming up on land, and you might just have to paddle steady at a lower rate to the start. Sometimes that can happen. So it's having a plan A, a plan B, different options, really understanding, it's hard. It can be hard and busy to navigate to the start. That doesn't have to be overwhelming or a worry. Being aware and prior planning will give you the opportunity to progress safely and effectively to the start and to your marshalling position. Tilda, do you want to tell us a little bit about when you're boating beyond the start?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you're boating from somewhere like Mortlake or University of London Boat Club, when you're boating there, it's really tempting sometimes, and this goes for quite a few places along the river, it's really tempting to think, oh, well, I'm just going to boat here and slot in because I'm marshalling right outside. That doesn't work for everyone else, because you aren't in order, ready for the marshals 15 minutes before the race has started. So yes, it may seem like an appealing option to jump in and try and sort of join the queue late, but actually thinking about everybody else and how many, some of these races have 500 crews on the river. So really thinking about how many people that impacts is really important. There will be river closure for all of these races. You can do your warm-up up towards queue, but it's really, really important that you understand the Tideway code. I wouldn't be recommending that to anyone who doesn't know the Tideway code well, especially given that the navigating the stream, navigating all of the other clubs that will be marshalling around that area. I think it's just really important to be very, very clear that you either know the rules back to front and you can be safe, or that area of the river extremely well. That is an option in terms of a little bit more warm-up area. And then as you progress down, you'll progress down the fairway, and you'll then turn off into your division, which I'll sort of bring up in a minute. There's a couple of the maps, but making sure that you know where it is that you will be marshalling. So as you approach, you know which number it is that you're trying to fit in between, or the two numbers that you're trying to fit in between. You come down the fairway and you very safely and sensibly turn to your marshalling location. I think it's really important with that for some of you, you'll be marshalling around bridges. Do not turn around close to those bridges. You need to have plenty of space either side. So making sure you have space downstream so you're not getting pulled onto the bridge, but also making sure you have space in knowing what's going to come through the bridge, because there could be 10 crews about to come through the bridge and turn into their marshalling locations. So then trying to turn around and maneuver around that is going to be extremely dangerous, especially when you've got a blind spot there. So that's worth mentioning. We'll come on to that a little bit more in a bit. But progressing down the fairway from up river as opposed to up against the stream, which in the inshore zone, which you will do if you're coming from downriver, like Putney or Fulham Reach area. So
And I
yeah,
think
you go.
as well, it's any object that is fixed in the tideway, you need to be very wary of, because that is something in which there's going to be a large amount of force, a large amount of pressure acting upon it. You could get stuck on it. It's a potential hazard for you. If you then get stuck on it, you then make that obstacle even larger. And then so the water that builds up around that gets even bigger, the pressure you're exposed to. It is not worth ending up in that situation. So a navigation buoy, you know, the big red, the big green channel markers, they are fixed in place. And if you know, one of the best things you can do is when you arrive at the tideway, just stand on the riverbank in a safe position and look at fixed objects and look at the water acting on them, because that is going to demonstrate to you how quickly the water is moving and why we need to give them plenty of room. It's also important when you are coming and progressing towards the start line, you're going to be inside the navigation buoys. I keep going to say buoys, very American. It's really
I can see that happening in your head.
really working on this here with the boys. It can sometimes feel like a bit tight because there are going to be many crews. You might be 3 or 4 abreast trying to travel towards the start. You cannot end up in the racing line. You cannot end up the wrong side of the boys. You are in danger there. Fundamentally, you are in the wrong. You need to be safe. That's what's so important. You're also going to be exposed to way too much stream. So if you're rowing to the start, don't lose all of your energy because you've put yourself right in the stream. Get in the bank, tuck in. It's going to make it a lot easier for your rowers. It's going to make it a lot easier to control where your boat's going. Anytime your bow points towards the center of the river, the stream is going to act on it and it's going to turn your boat. You have to remember that. So when you're marshalling, if your bow is pointing into the bank, you're probably going to stay tucked into the bank. If it starts to point even the smallest amount into the middle, it's going to catch your bow and it's going to start to turn you. So when you're trying to stay tucked in and safe, keep pointing into the bank. And then, and this is where the marshals and the umpires are very good at what they do, they will ask you to turn your bow into the middle of the river. And that will allow your boat to turn. So they're really trying to help you out here. So remember those easy, simple things that just make it a lot easier for you. And as coxes, the hardest thing often is getting to the start and getting back home after the race. We want this to be smooth sailing. Okay, this gives you the best chance for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think really good point there that you just mentioned about the, thinking about where your bow is compared to the stream. When you are marshalling, it's really important that think about the effect the stream is having on your boat. Think about how many people, especially at the moment, we know how many crews aren't able to get out in the water given the fast moving river. The river is extremely fast out on the tideway at the moment. So being really aware of how much the stream is having an impact on your hull and on your boat is going to be critical. So if you're sat there, if you need, in order to stay stationary, it might not be bow pair rowing, it might not be stern pair rowing, it might be all 8. And I think bearing that in mind and keeping that in mind is going to be so important. So I think at Hammersmith Head, there was X number of crews and there's X amount of time for the marshals and umpires to get all of those crews through the start line in the gap that we have with the tide going out and for it to be safe. You can only help marshals and umpires by trying to make sure that there's never a big gap between you and the crew in front or you and the crew behind, and making sure that you're safe. So yes, there's a little bit of a gap, but making sure that you are controlling your boat in order to stay in the same place. I'll mention it again. You're looking at the bank to stay there. I might need 6 people to row continuously. And that's fine. You're not killing your rowers. You're actually doing them a huge, huge favor. Being sat after warming up dead still for an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours, however long it's going to be, isn't the best thing for your athletes before they then go off and do the race. So using this time to keep the rowers warm, to keep them safe, to keep your bows in the right position, to keep your hull in the right position, you're protecting your fin, you're protecting your rudder, you're making sure that you're protecting your boat. All of those things are really, really important. And I think that it's very easy to think, oh, actually, the best thing here is for us all to have a nice rest. The best thing is to stay warm, and then you'll be ready to race. So as soon as, like Morgan said, the umpires call you around to turn into the fairway to do your race, you are ready, you're warm, you're ready to go. This one here, I'm going to just jump onto the next slide, but this one here, know your marshalling location and number is really important. We aren't going to be able to tell you that. So knowing, get it out. There we go. So these are just two of the marshalling location maps. So please keep checking the websites to see all of them. But you'll have a division. It's really obvious. You'll have a color, so it'll be yellow or white. I think for School's Head, they have multiple colors. So you'll know, oh, look, those people are yellow, I must be on that side of the river. Or if it's School's Head, you might go, oh, look, everyone there's wearing a pink number, so I'll go into that division. So that's really handy. But knowing roughly where that area is before you boat is super, super important. So you know where you're progressing to, and you know where you're going to turn to. The men's head of the river has a very slightly different pattern, in the sense that there are 3 divisions and above Chiswick Bridge. So just making sure that you know where it is that you're supposed to be in relation to the bank. So if you are a little bit further out, tends to be the crews that are higher up, as in go off first. Really make sure that you are aware of the people inside as well as the people in front and behind you. So you've got to be aware of everyone around you, looking behind you, keeping an eye on who's next to you.
I think something as well to remember is this is why giving yourself enough time when you're boating to get there is so important. So for the women's head, 15 minutes before the race starts, once you get to that point, you can't cross the river after Barnes Bridge. So if you end up and you're in a situation where you're like, I need to cross over, you're really going to have to make yourself safe and visible to a marshal or an umpire, and you're going to need to ask them for further instructions. How you end up in this position, you know, you've not given yourself enough time, but sometimes these things happen. You're going to need to ask for help, and they will tell you, they will clear, they've got radios, they communicate with each other. I think there's something like 50 to 60 marshals dotted around. There are eyes everywhere. They are there in a position so they can see you, so they can keep you safe. If you need to ask for help, if you end up in any situations like this, you need to do that. There is no shame in doing that. Sometimes things come up, you might, I don't know, you might lose a bolt, you might have a problem with your wheel, something might occur like this. You've boated, you've given yourself enough time, then you have to pull in somewhere and fix something, which means you're a bit late, and then you have to carry on. Communicate. This is the way to stay safe, to make sure that everybody involved in the event knows what's going on, that they can put you in the best position so that you can still race and have a great race, but so that everyone else can also stay safe.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a good question that the question is, won't it be difficult for that crew that are in the middle of the river? So you can fit 2 boats on the inshore zone. It just takes some navigating and some care, and it will be a little bit more tricky for those in the middle, which is why it's the crews that tend to be going off higher up. And it's really, really important at that point that you keep on top of how many people are rowing and where you are and who's around you. So you're just constantly aware, navigating, calm, communicating with your crew, communicating with the marshals. So if there isn't enough space, communicate that with the coxes and the rowers around you as well. And I think that's a huge thing. You think, okay, well, I know that I've got to communicate with the marshals. I know that I've got to communicate with my crew. You don't necessarily think, oh, I should communicate with the people that, you know, I'm competing against. They are going to be some of your closest friends in that situation to make sure that everyone is safe. So chatting to the person next to you, chatting to the cox, chatting to the bow person, making sure that you're always thinking, oh, have we got enough room on your stern? Have we got enough room on your bows? That's going to be really critical.
And that's not us saying, sitting there being like, hiya mate, what's your race plan? What are you doing later? Coxing etiquette is so important. It is one of the best skills you will ever learn, because they're the only people that also understand you truly, and they will have a phenomenal skill set in which you can learn from, just like you're going to have a great skill set too. If you perform with etiquette, you will do some of the best racing you have ever done. The only time you have the worst race of your life is when that etiquette goes out the window. And if it's you that lost the etiquette, you feel really stupid. And if it's someone else that lost the etiquette, you look really stupid. Okay, so just remember that, all right? Because you can do some outstanding maneuvers, navigation, racing, times. You might end up going faster than you ever thought you were going to go before, because there was etiquette between crews, and that's so important to remember.
100% couldn't agree with that anymore. And I think a clean race is your fastest race. So bearing that in mind, you want to get from A to B in the cleanest way possible. The only way you can do that is using the people around you.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Okay. So Morgan's touched on this already. Really, really important. Anything in the river that you think might be an obstacle, whether that be a navigation buoy, whether that be the bridge, whether that be one of the piers, like there are so many obstacles along the way. It is really key that you do not turn close to those. It is also really key that as a cox with 8 people in front of you, you have a blind spot. So knowing roughly where the navigation buoys are going to be is crucial. And you can do that. You can look that up. You can go on Google Maps and you can follow the river along, and you can see where the navigation buoys are. You can see what the river looks like. I really recommend doing that. You can also watch the Tideway video and see what they look like. And it's a really nice visual of what the track looks like. I think it's very, very important that you have an idea of, oh, I think there should be a navigation buoy coming up soon. And we've both been in this situation. You think, oh, there's a navigation buoy coming up soon and I can't see it. So making sure that you can see it, making sure you put yourself in a position, not tipping your boat around, obviously, but, you know, whether that means looking up a little bit so you've got a little bit more vision, or getting down low so you've got a little bit more vision. Either of those things are quite handy, and really making sure that in those blind spots, you don't have a crew or another crew, or you don't have a navigation buoy. I'd imagine the bridges are a little bit more obvious in that situation. The effect of the stream. We've got 2 videos to show you here. So this is not to scare you. We're not showing you these videos to scare you. We're just showing you these videos so you have an idea of the situation you may end up in if you are not completely switched on and you don't have that really good coxing etiquette. So you can see here the impact of the stream, 1 on the boat that's stuck on the bridge, but 2, you can see it flooding next to the buttress. And this here just goes to show how fast the river is. So Morgan mentioned before, go out, stand, if you've got the opportunity to stand next to one of the bridges, go and have a look and see how the water is moving around it. If you don't, look at the piers, look at the static objects, navigation buoys, you know, the boating ramps, and have a look and see the impact it is having on any sort of object, how fast it is moving. And that will give you can build in time when you are turning. You can build in time, but once you start turning, that has to be a swift maneuver. So your crew have to be switched on and listening. It's really critical that they know that, and communicating that with them on the land before you push off is going to be vital. And then making sure that people around you know, right, I need to turn now. So if you're going to turn and there are 3 crews sort of paddling along next to you or beside you, just let them know, give them a heads up. The same with the umpires, the same with the umpire launchers.
I think as well, the same thing goes for, you know, we spoke about the point at which your bow starts to turn into the stream. And so whenever you're crossing, if you have to cross over from Surrey to Middlesex, the stream's going to act on your hull. So if you get the angle wrong, it will turn you. And you almost end up, you're kind of like drawing a diagonal to get yourself across the water. That can actually be a really useful time rowing up to the start to get a bit of an understanding of the stream, because we talk about it, and look, it's scary if you get it wrong. It is. And we don't want you to get it wrong. But if you get it right, when you're racing, this is the fastest you're going to go, and it is the most fun. And we're trying to give you that chance. You know, we want you to absolutely let rip out there, and we want you to see splits quicker than you've ever gone before. So the more you understand what the water's doing and what that means, the better able you are to have a good race. And looking at the water, standing on bridges, you know, that if you're thinking, you know, okay, well, that's pretty basic. What's the next step? Looking at the weather forecast. If you're looking at the stream and it's raging and you know the wind is going to be blowing the opposite direction to which the stream's going, it's going to be wavy. That's a new element for you. If you can preempt these things, that's going to make you even better at the job that you do, but it's going to allow you to be safer too. So we're not just telling you these things so you think, oh, this is boring, I just want to be safe going to the start. This is the skill set so you can do some really, really awesome things down the racetrack.
Yeah, 100%. And I think in terms of that, making sure that you have the cleanest race possible. So during the race, it may be that your bow pair need to take a look behind them. You need to take a look behind you so you know who's behind you. That isn't going to upset the balance if you're aware of it. If you know it's going to happen, it's much more likely to upset the balance if you don't know that's going to happen. And I think that communicating in that moment is also really important. So having a really clean race, you're going to be fast on the speed, you're going to be fast on the track, you're going to know that you can get past the other crews around you, you're going to know you can get in the fastest bit of water and feel really confident about it. So this second video, speaking of obstacles in the water, the black buoy being one of them. You can see here the impact the stream is having. It's so fast. They didn't have control to be able to make a difference. So knowing that that's there, sorry, play it again. So knowing that that's there, knowing that you're heading towards something like that is really important. So that's where your bow pair can come in extremely handy. It's also where you have to keep a good lookout of what's going on in front of you. Knowing your trajectory, taking the river in as a whole, is a large body of water. Being able to observe the whole body of water is an incredible skill that you don't have to do in many other places. And it is something that will set you up for success.
I think as well, when you look at the map or when you know where the black buoy is, you think, how does anyone ever hit that? You know, it's so obvious. Like, right, why would you be over there? When you get to that part of the race, you are also going to be fatigued. And it is very easy to get too close to that. It is very easy. And we don't want to end up in a sweaty situation where you got yourself a bit too close for it, because it's gonna scalp you, you know. I think don't never assume the Tideway is this living, breathing thing that throws all sorts at you. You can't assume you'll just get caught in the back foot.
Absolutely. Okay, so onto the course. We've got you'll be able to see in the top left corner roughly where we are along the track. I think that's a lovely image because you can see the shape of the whole course. And when we're talking about looking at the river as a whole, really stepping back and looking at it even further away as like, this is the course that you're going to take. It isn't straight. So really bearing that in mind and thinking about how you are going to take your crew down the track, one, on the fastest line, but two, in the safest possible way, knowing what that looks like, imagining it, envisaging it, will make such a huge difference to how you call the race, how you operate on the steering, how you like get across those like little edges, whether that's be in motivation or in your race plan, knowing what's coming up and having that in your mind, being able to describe that to your crew, right? We're going around the Middlesex Bend here, coming through Barnes Bridge. everyone knows where that is. Everyone's confident. Right, we've done X number of minutes of the race. I know where I am. Okay, now we're coming around the Surrey bend. We're coming past the A. Again, you've got that in your head. And you have got that at your fingertips to be able to describe to your crew where they are, what's happening. And over this long race, that is so, one, exciting, but two, it means that you stay on the task at hand. You can get wrapped up into the rhythm, into the pattern that you want to row, as well as being able to take on board all of this stuff that's going on around you. So we've got a few images here. So on the left, that's the start line. That's the university post. So that will be the start line for some of the races. I cannot guarantee that will be the start line for all of the races. So please, please look up on the website where the start line is. I've put that there because I know it will be the start line for some of the races. So it's useful for you guys to know where it is. There will usually be a huge, big flag or a boat on the side that says the start. So when you are progressing to the start, if you happen to be marshalling around there, take a look. If you don't, when you are progressing to the start, make sure you have a look around so you can see it. The middle image that's of Chiswick Bridge. So that's the central arch. That's the way you will go through with the fairway. And the third image, I've used this because it's got the disc lights on it. So you can see in the center, there are 2 lights around here. So this is actually going the other direction, but those 2 lights are on both sides of the bridge. When you come through, they're a really good point because they're the center of the bridge. So it's a really good reference point. Morgan, do you want to talk about turning and lining yourself up?
Yeah, I think depending on which side of the river you're turning from and turning in, just have a think about where you want to land, because if you take too long in the turn, it's probably going to draw you wide. Yep. If you turn too quickly, it's going to draw you too narrow. So it's having a think about where you are and how you want to get lined up. That's why the marshals are going to turn you with enough room so you can get the boat around and then get your point. And get your point. You know, think about the whole way down the track. You want to be pointing your bow. Where is my bow? What am I aiming for? What are my headings in the distance? And each time you get to a bridge, think about your exit angle. Don't think about your entry. This race is so quick. The bridges are at different angles because of the way the river is going. Think about your exit angle, and that will help set you up for the rest of the race. So in the men's head, you've got a crew that's going to be, the crews on the Surrey side, they're 2 abreast. So they're going to have to move as far when they want to turn and go. If you're coming from the Middlesex side, you're going to have to turn a little bit further. Just play around with what, I can't tell you how many strokes that is or how many, it depends on your boat. So just take the time and be patient to be ready and then go. Then you'll have your best race.
So as you come through Chiswick Bridge, I think in an ideal world, you want to be lining up with your stroke side blades coming under the orange lights, the central lights. Thinking about that, you don't want to be pointing too tight around that bend. The stream is fast. I would urge you to take a look online at the depth charts and see where the sort of deepest bit of water is. Logic suggests deepest water, fastest water. So making sure we find that and getting yourself lined up slightly to the right, but as Morgan said, thinking about where your bows are pointing. So we don't want to be cutting that bend. 1, it's going to put you in trouble with the navigation boys. And 2, it's going to put you in trouble with lining yourself up for the next bridge, which is Barnes Bridge. So you also don't want to be right over next to the wall, but you do want to be slightly to the right of center.
Yeah, I agree on that. I always would think about it, you know, my hull is going to be around the sea of Chiswick. So that's the bit that I'm sat in.
Yeah.
So it works the same.
Absolutely. So roughly 3 to 4 minutes and you'll make it to Barnes Bridge. Come on. Ah, here we go. I did it before. So lining up with Barnes Bridge. So here, this is actually, I don't know if she spotted this, an image of Morgan doing the
Oh, I actually did not know this.
racing track and me marshalling over here. So this pub here is the White Hart. The White Hart is an excellent pub to know when you are, well, anyway, but also when you are setting yourself up to come through the bridges. Barnes Bridge, which you can see here, you're obviously wanting to come through the central arch. You want to line yourself up to exit this bridge on the left-hand side. It's really, really, really key that you don't cut this too tight. Because if you cut this too tight, and let's just say you've cut that bend too tight and you've got a crew on your outside, coming through that bridge is going to be really tricky for both of you. Think about where your bows are. If your bows are pointing over to the right-hand side, you have got so much work to do through the bridge, where the stream is fastest, where it's pushing around the buttress to get round this bend. And you can see how deep this bend is here and how tight this bend is. So lining yourself up a little bit on the outside of that bend, the Chiswick bend, this one here, this one here, lining yourself up slightly on the outside here, be able to point your bows through towards the left-hand side of the central buttress, so you've got that exit angle, is going to be really key. Do you have any thoughts on that, Morgan?
I always think I think Barnes Bridge is probably the hardest bridge. And I think your gut is going to be like, turn, we're going around the turn, turn. You'll probably end up too tight. If you hold that off a little bit, you're going to be probably 2 blade lengths off the green marker buoys, holding that turn. That's going to give you enough room to be in a good position. And then think about, as you're getting, 4 lengths, 3 lengths, 2 lengths, you can get a sense of how your hull's progressing and what angle you're starting to get yourself into. Then it's just having like a bit of a picture in your mind's eye of, where am I going once I'm through that bridge? So the turn is, you're going to be off to your left. And if you come through the bridge and then you go, oh, okay. So like, remember that difference. I'm getting, Barnes Bridge is coming up. I'm coming towards it. I know I'm going to be off to the left. So you need to hold, you need to wait, you need to be patient. Rowing is the ultimate sport where you need to be fast. And in order to be fast, you must be patient, get your exit angle, and that will give you the best thing. So if your spidey sense is tingling, like I want to turn, just give me 3 strokes, then do it, and then you'll usually be all right.
Yeah, massively agree with that. And you've got, as you exit there, you've got a crossover just after Barnes Bridge, so you have a navigation buoy which will be on the Middlesex bank, and you just be aware of it, just so you know that it's there. There'll be one on either side. One, you don't want to be shooting off too wide around this bend. You don't want to be in the outside of that bend at all. And 2, you want to make sure you're not aiming directly for that green buoy. You want to be pretty close to it, but we don't want to be hitting it.
Agreed. And I also think it's depending on where you are, what number you are racing, there might be some crews marshaled, which means they'll be cheering, which is super exciting and it's really cool. But don't get caught up in that. Acknowledge it. It's great. It's nice. It feels good. Be present. Okay, where's my bow? Great.
Absolutely. Alrighty. Really playing ball. There we go. Might hand over to you for this one.
Okay, so this part of the race is sometimes referred to as no man's land. So you've gone off the start and it's really exciting, and then you're like 1.2 again, you come through Barnes Bridge and it's great, and then you've gone past the bandstand and then you think, where are we? This is really dragging a bit, isn't it? the water might be changing a little bit, you're not really sure, you think there's going to be a pier or some steps, or someone said the steps and a pier and something like that here somewhere, and you're looking for it and you don't know where it is, and the buoys start changing color and you're just not sure. This is the point probably at the most opportunity. If you can remain focused and keep the crew on task here, and you might be going through, people like to use time, so that it might be 3-minute sections, you might be using distance, whatever your plan is, but keep it simple. Know that you're going to have a turn coming up. This is a great chance to put a little bit of work in. We want to be loose, we want to be long, we want to really drive the rhythm. The Chiswick Pier, usually the best way to spot it is the ramp is kind of white from a distance, something is sticking out from the Middlesex side. Did I say that right? Just double check here. Something is sticking out, and you think, right, that's it, you know, and you're gonna see it, and it's gonna come up as quickly as that. Once you get alongside it, you know it's definitely it. But by that point in time, it's too late. You're on to your next marker, your next heading. Okay, so you're looking ahead, you're pointing your bow, you're looking in the distance. This is going to come at a point where the ayot's coming up, and the river is going to kind of split into thirds. It's always in thirds, but you're going to be kind of between the ayot and the Surrey bank. You're going to be kind of the middle of the 2/3, maybe a little bit towards the Middlesex side, if anything at all. You don't want to be too far to Surrey just yet, because you still want to make a smooth turn. We still want the deepest channel, but you know these things are going to come up. So it's going to be a smooth, gradual turn. You're going to be coming up to the pier. You know this is coming through. This is a chance of your race where you know halfway's coming up. So you get to the end of the ayot, you're going to look for these blue doors, and if you spot them, you're a wizard, because they're a tiny window frame, and it's, you know, that's it, it's gone. No halfway is coming up, and this is going to help your crew. This is going to help you. So if you're driving to halfway, you can drive out of halfway. You'll be coming onto one of the bigger parts of the Surrey Bend, and we know Hammersmith is around the corner. Be aware, the wind will change. So whatever the wind has been when you've started, remember you're taking turns. So the direction of the wind changes as you progress down the track. If you're worried about what to say, this is often a thing for a long race, 6.8K. What am I going to say for 6.8K? Look ahead. You'll be able to see the wind shadows across the water. That's going to give you something to talk about. It's going to give you an opportunity to prepare your rowers for something that's coming up. So that might be a late square. It might be a crosswind. You might need bow side to squeeze up through the finishes a little bit. Be a bit more forgiving, because the wind's going to push them over, you know. It's going to give you real parts where you can both help them come through a very quiet section of the track, a kind of lonely section of the track. Sometimes you might have ended up in a vacuum. You might be around a lot of crews, but it's going to keep you on the job. So don't cut that Surrey Bend. This is really tempting, like really, really tempting. And this is what I mean about hold your nerve, remember the thirds of the river, look at the depth charts. The pier and the ayot are going to give you a chance to remain central, to have a little check-in. Try not to turn too early. It's about being smooth and gradual. I would also say, remember that different ramps are going to be sticking out. You're going to have umpires' launches, usually attached from sometimes different buoys around there. You're going to have the red buoys this time. Again, we don't want to be too close to them. You don't want to be too close. You don't want to push somebody else too close. There's plenty of room. If you're patient in this turn, it's going to set you up for the next bridge really nicely. If you go too soon, you've still got time to fix it, but it might be a little bit more challenging.
I think that really agree with that, and I think this is probably the section for me where I know I'm on the right track more than any other section along the whole course, because of how little steering I have to do. And if I find myself having to steer, I know I haven't quite got myself in the right place. And I think that's, you can, like Morgan says, you can correct it, but it does take a little bit more. The less steering you have to do through the section, the more you know you're right in the bulk of that stream. So trust yourself, smooth, gentle movements to guide the boat round this bend. And you are really guiding, you are not really steering at all.
Agreed.
Beautiful. So the bridge. So we've got photo in the middle here, which is from the Putney side looking back through Hammersmith Bridge. And then you've got another photo here, which we'll zoom in on in a second, which is the other direction. So Chiswick side looking through towards Putney. Obviously, that's the way you will be racing. It's just very useful to have the image from both sides to know where it is that you're trying to set your exit angle up to. So you're entering and then exiting this bridge in a very similar manner to the way you do with Barnes Bridge, but it's the other way. So you're setting yourself up for a bend towards Surrey. I'll play this little video here to begin with, just so you can see how close you may end up to the buttress. And then we're just going to go back a second. So around here. Oh, there we go. You'll be able to see in here the lampposts just above. Everyone talks about this wonderful magic second lamppost. It is fairly obvious when you know where to look. It isn't, for me, it's not the most crucial part of it. However, it's a very helpful reference. I would say you would ideally want either yourself or your stroke side blades under that lamppost. So it's steered smoothly round and then you pointed yourself to exit fairly tight. Being aware, however, on the other side that you do have a navigation buoy that you do not want to hit, and there will be a video coming up of where that is so you can see the trajectory of where you are going in this one. So this is Hammersmith Bridge looking from the Chiswick end towards the Putney end, and mentioned that second lamppost, aiming for that, really making sure as you're entering you are setting up your exit angle. The green buoy that you can see over here, the tide will likely be a little bit higher than this. The green buoy that you can see over here, you do want to be somewhere between the green buoy and the second lamppost. You don't want to be all the way over right next to that right-hand buttress, that Surrey buttress. And that's because of how you're setting yourself up on this bend. Really taking into account the whole river, you want to then guide yourself and direct yourself towards the other side of the bridge. How does that sound to you, Morgan?
Yeah, bang on. And I think, you know, really reinforcing, we're thinking about exit angles every time we're coming up to bridges. There's some really great, decent bridges for us to look at on this track, but we know that there is a turn following them. And so if you get distracted by the angle of the bridge, that means it's not going to set you up very well for your turn. So really thinking about those exit angles is going to help you out so much. And again, you know, looking at the depth charts, you'll know that actually it's not that deep in the first lamppost from the right. If you're looking at the Surrey bank, it's really not that deep there. Sometimes crews in training, they'll have to, you know, deviate the course in which they're going. So we have to be careful. And that's why when we're talking about that green buoy that's on the Middlesex station, trying to be between there and that second lamppost before you're then trying to set up your exit angle is going to help you to get that right.
Perfect. So what we'll show you in this next slide is there's a really good video of the red navigation buoy that's on the Putney side of the Hammersmith Bridge. So as you've gone through it, and there's likely to be a marshal at this point. So watching this video, I want you to think about, one, how many crews there are across the river. So taking into account all of those crews around you, that etiquette that we mentioned previously. And two, that there may be a marshalling launch to protect you from hitting that navigation buoy, but it may feel a little bit like it's encroaching on the course. Of course, they are doing the best job they can to make sure you are safe. So keeping a little bit of a lookout there and making sure your bow pairs are aware of that that might be there is going to be really important. So that's something to observe when you watch this video. So you can see how many crews there are, and there are a number of crews, particularly on the right-hand side of your screen, so the Surrey side of the river, who are taking a really great line. But obviously they are all making sure that they are watching out for each other as well. And so you can see here in the distance, this is the red navigation buoy. Here is the marshalling launch. So this crew are having to do quite a big maneuver to come around that launch. So you need to be aware of that. So you do not want to disrupt your line. You want it to be the fastest line you can have.
And I think kind of building on that is like, you've got to really look ahead. That's going to help you so much. Looking in the distance is going to really help you out. And you probably would spot that launch a little bit sooner if you're really, really looking as far as you can in the distance.
Yeah, hugely agree with that. So along this stretch, the first thing that you will come up next to at that red navigation buoy will be the Harrods Depository. That's a really nice marker for you to go past. The wall lasts for about 150 meters. So it's an excellent marker to sort of be aware of. Going through there, you are really pushing into the last 2,000 meters of the race. And then the mile post, which Morgan will tell you isn't the easiest thing to spot. Neither of us have ever see it during the racetrack, but knowing roughly where it is, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that I notice more on the return when we're going Putney towards Chiswick. But I think, again, looking at a map, having an idea of what it's nearby, you know, if you're coming past Harrods Depository, two things. One, the water can sometimes change a little bit, and that's because of the wall that is there. And you know when you're coming through that point, okay, I probably want to be kind of loosening, but also sharpening up a bit. We're starting to step on a bit to drive home. And I know that milepost is going to be coming up. So even if you can't see it, most of us have got their GPSs now to track their meters and have a bit of an idea of where we're at. And it's just kind of being mindful of that's coming up. That's a marker point for us. Okay, right. What's my next heading? Where are we going? What's the part of the plan that I'm on?
And just knowing that at that point, so you've come past Harrods, roughly 2,000 meters to go. You go through the milepost, roughly 1,600 meters to go. So it's a good turning point in terms of turning the screw and making sure that in this section of the race, it's really, really important you get this right. You haven't spent all your beans up to Barnes Bridge to then sort of tootle off and blow up at this point. It's so crucial to stay on target, and knowing the distance markers will make a big difference to your communication with your crew.
I think as well, it's very easy to know that there is the final Middlesex turn coming up after you've completed this Surrey bend. The red navigation markers, the red buoys, are going to be a really good friend of yours, a good ally, and you're going to be closer to them than you probably anticipate. 2.5 blade lengths away from those buoys themselves. They're going to set you up. So we're not trying to draw a dot to dot. We're trying to keep the hull parallel to the shoreline to avoid that initial gut temptation to start cutting the turn.
Yeah, and exactly as we talked about with the Surrey bend, we don't want to get swept onto what we call the Fulham Flats, which is right over on that Middlesex side. You want to sweep around the outside of this bend, exactly like Morgan just said there, resisting the temptation to cut the bend. And that leads you really nicely towards the Black Buoy and the line of boats, which is your final section of the race. What Morgan just mentioned there about really looking ahead of you is so important. We've mentioned the Black Buoy previously. You've seen what can happen if you don't look out for it. Keeping an eye on where that is so crucial. But you are able to line yourself up for an excellent line into the finish, roughly 2.5 boat widths away from the Black Buoy. And that is going to guide you all the way through the line of boats. And you can see the line of boats from two angles here, but really making sure you're just sweeping through next to those line of boats, nice and easy, nice and simple, not getting tucked into the dirty water of them, but just enough away that you're on a nice trajectory all the way through that finish line.
Yeah, agreed. And I think a boathouse, you know, when you go past the milepost and you're coming between the milepost and the black buoy, is Barn Elms, and you can see the launch, the kind of the boating area from there. You can see Barn Elms written across the club name at the front of it, so it's a good visual. But also, there's going to be a channel marker there in which you don't want to get completely sucked into. You're probably going to be another blade length further away from that one than you are the other channel markers in that area. So, you know, you're 2.5 blade lengths away from the rest. You're probably going to need to be about 3 away from that one. So that will allow you to set up your line so that you come into the black buoy in the line of boats. And if it's smooth and gradual, then you're going to be in the right place. If you're working the rudder a lot, then you're going to be really fighting it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you hit the black buoy, you've gone past Barn Elms, you've gone past Craven Cottage. It's roughly 1,000 meters to go. You hit the black buoy and there's around 600-700 meters to go, depending on where your finish line is. So at this point, it's really key that we tell you your finish line could be anywhere along this, depending on what race you are doing. It might be at the pier, it might be at Westminster School. So please read the instructions to make sure you know where your finish line is.
Yeah, we know that Men's Head normally finishes 50 meters past the pier. So the events, they try their best to put a nice big finish banner sign, but knowing that, you know, you might race in multiple races, you might do Women's Head, you might do Men's Head, and the finish lines, as Tilda said, are in different locations, and that little bit of information can be the difference between you sneaking a position and moving up one, or maybe dropping down one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really exciting at this point as well. Usually the bank's quite busy, it gets a little bit noisier. You're going through the line of boats. You kind of get to check off each boat club as you go past. So keeping that in mind as you approach this point is really important. A lot of that will help carry you through the finish line. So keeping it really simple with your coxing calls and making sure that you're really clear is going to be really important, as well as making sure you've got your crew to that point ready to turn the screw and go again for your finish wind. So that'll be you coming through. That's the line, that's the steering in terms of the track. You'll be coming through your finish line wherever it is as you've looked up. And then I think the next steps that are really important is we just cover what happens from the finish line all the way through back, not how you navigate that area, how you navigate getting out of the way and getting back onto your course to head back to your boat club. So I think the first thing to note here, and then I'll hand over to Morgan, is you must travel through both bridges at this point. So you'll finish the race, you must keep moving, and then you must travel through both bridges. There'll be plenty of marshals and umpires there to be really clear and direct with you when they want you to turn. And making sure, like we've mentioned before, that we're not turning too close to those buttresses and not too close to the bridges is going to be really, really crucial.
Yeah, and I think it's important to not assume you know what the umpire or the marshal is going to ask you to do. Like, listen really clearly, because they might give you a different instruction to the crew in front of you, and that's only going to be marginally different in the space in which that you turn, but it's going to allow things to be a bit more seamless and effective. So really listen to what they're saying, don't assume, and again, just acknowledge and communicate with them. If you don't understand, ask a question, and it's going to put you in the best place. What we don't want to happen is you do all this hard work and you've done a great job, and then once the race is over, you do something and that causes you to have a penalty or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you've mentioned, and I remember that there's usually someone around there like Matthew Holland, who's really loud and really clear with where he wants you, which marshalling location he wants you in, where he wants you to be traveling next to the crews around you. But it's also your responsibility to look after your boat at that point. So acknowledging, communicating, even through there when you're tired, like you still haven't done your bit of the race. So making sure that everyone is listening to you and your crew and you are communicating with the people that need to know around you. And you'll travel back up past the pier and on the inside of the line of boats. So something to be mindful of there is the tide will have reduced since you started your race. So it will be shallower. So being careful and being mindful of one cruise that are landing. So there'll be lots of boats landing and Putney to get out and de-rig. And if you aren't one of those boats and you need to keep traveling upriver, making sure you're not getting too shallow, making sure you're not getting in front of crews. So being really aware of what's happening at that point.
I think as well, this is where we talk about, you know, our coxing checklist or what we pack with us. And we think about, you know, we've got spares, we've got your rigger jiggers, we've got, you might take your map that you strap to your leg. You could also take the little coxing card that you sometimes get in your race pack, and it tells you the bridges that you're going to go through once you finish the race. If you know you're traveling back, pack some lights. You know, it's so easy to stick in that bag, then that's got you covered and that's got you safe. Those little things are going to help you on your return as you head back to where you boated from.
And I'm pretty sure might have even been you that mentioned this to me, Morgan, but for example, the women's head is fairly late this year, so the likelihood of you needing lights is pretty high. So making sure that, you know, particularly for that event, you've got them, but keep checking, look at when the sun is setting, really make sure you're prepared for that. On top of that, with your lights, making sure you have the right type of lights. So it's really easy to just think, oh, I'll just shove a couple of lights in. Don't accidentally pack a red one. Don't accidentally pack a green one. And I think like you need 2 white lights, one that blinks on your bow and one that's steady on your stern. So just having a way to attach them, knowing how you're going to do it, make it really easy for yourself when you're out there in the midst of it.
Yeah, 100%.
I guess the only other thing on progressing back to your boat club is there will be points where some of you have to cross over. So if you do approach a point where you have to cross over, the race might still be going ahead. Even if the race isn't going ahead, if there's still a marshal there, making sure that you are checking in with the marshals, you get confirmation and acknowledgement before you decide to cross over. It's really, really important.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, again, just because racing's over, you absolutely fundamentally still cross with purpose. You know, you can't have your rowers messing around at this point in time. You have to be safe. The tideway is still very much alive and active. The stream is still incredibly strong. If we get that wrong, you know, you could end up in a little bit of difficulty.
So that's the course. Does anyone have any questions specifically on the course at this point? Okay, this is a really good question. So what would you do if there was an equipment failure in the middle of the race? Really important, I think, to communicate. I'm just going to stop sharing now. It's really important to communicate that either with a marshal or with an umpire, if you cannot keep going, you need to be able to move to a position where you are safe out the way of the racing crews, but you are also able to communicate with an umpire to tell them what's happening. I think that will vary depending on where you are along the track. So being really aware of what's around you, being really aware of who's behind you, who's in front of you, what's around you, I think that will be key.
I think as well, you'll get a bit of an idea of where the bulk of the racing crews are going. So you'll be able to see where the safest part is, kind of removing yourself out of that racing situation if you need to. And it just, you know, remain calm and again, communicate with whoever you can.
I think that in terms of the course, multiple boats. Oh, this is a great question. What will you do in terms of multiple boats going through the bridge? Really, really be aware that you are looking around, thinking about which line that you want to be on, but also the line that's going to be safest. Because if you start clashing and colliding through a bridge, that's 1, not safe, and 2, not going to get your boat to the finish line fastest. So put yourself in some space and create space around you. So talking to the cox, maybe getting the bow pair to talk. I think being really clear. You don't have to be loud and shouting and swearing for people. You definitely don't want to be swearing for people to be able to listen to you and hear you. So mind your language, think about being commanding and direct, but by being clear. And I think that's really important. I don't know if you've had encounters with this one with the bow pair. So what would you do if in terms of communicating with your bow pair and making sure that that comes to the rest of the crew?
I think that, you know, it's having conversation on land before you go out that you need your bow pair to kind of have their eyes peeled. I would also say a clear projected voice, and if you know your bow pair, you know their voice, you can usually hear them. And they just need to kind of be vocal if they think they can see something, and also have it, you know, communicated with the crew that if they hear the bow pair say something, to then pass it along so that, you know, everyone can see it or everyone can hear it, because you are a bit further away. But I think that there's usually a good chance you can hear them, and if not, then get other people in the boat to repeat it. You know, it's a very simple way of going about it, but simple is often very effective. Marshals are very frequent down the track, so they see everything. I'm trying to remember how many marshals we have. I know Zoe's on the call and she definitely knows how many marshals it is, but they are everywhere, and they are there to allow it to run smoothly and safely. They can see the things that are going on. So just because you can't see them doesn't mean they're not there.
I think it's also, brilliant, amazing. So 50 to 70 umpires and marshals for the races. So they're plenty, they're amazing. And I think we had a bit of a list of things that we thought would be really helpful in terms of just like sort of your checklist before you go out. And I think that probably would be a good place for us to sort of round this up on. And one thing that Morgan taught me that I think is amazing, and I wish I'd done this, was printing out a little version of the map, laminating it, or you get one in your race pack and sticking that to your leg. So you know the course that you are going to, you can take a glance at it. I think that was probably the best tip I learned from you. So I liked that one.
I think you know, there's a lot of space on your thigh when you're coxing, so stick that on there, along with, it might be your race plan, it might be your timings, it might be what to do once you finish the race. You know, we don't want you to put all this work in to be safe to get to the start, to be safe and having a great race, for then something to go wrong and you to kind of lose out on what you've done because you've navigated the wrong way post-race.
On that list, we also had like a few spares. So thinking about spare nut, spare bolt, a few spare height washers, making sure you take a rigger jigger. What did you say? Other brands available?
Yeah, other brands are available.
So making sure you've got a spanner that has a 10 and a 13 mil on it so that you are prepared. You could take bin liners for your kit so that if you have a long way to go at the end, your kit's still dry for when you want to put that back on. I think that's a really good tip. Making sure that you take your phone with you, so you probably want that in a waterproof case. Really key in terms of making sure that you are able to communicate if anything does happen. You are able to communicate. What else was on the list? Was that?
I think those are fairly useful things to kind of bring with you. And then I think we can see there's a lot of questions coming in, but we're conscious of the time. Yeah. But the one last thing we haven't spoken about is your progression once you finish the race. You need to progress through both the bridges. Double check again each specific event website. An example of, you know, Matthew Holland is very good. I remember him being there at the end of Women's Head. I feel like he was there at the end of Men's Head as well. But he's really clear in the instructions that he gives you on, you know, you must proceed through both bridges. He tells you where he wants you to go. He understands that you've just raced. All the marshals, all the umpires, they're going to understand this. And I think just listening to them, don't assume you know what they're going to tell you to do, because there's definitely been times when a crew in front of me has been asked to do something slightly differently from what I've been asked to do. And that might be we clear both bridges and then I turn a little bit sooner than the other crew that's around me, you know? So if you're assuming that you know what they're going to say, you're probably going to get that wrong. Listen to the instructions, be safe, be aware, make sure you progress so you're clear of all the racing that has gone on. And then just proceeding with caution when you're coming back through past the pier. So I think there's been maybe some pier extension works So it's about making sure that you've got plenty of room and again, listening to where you're being asked to go when you progress back from that point.
And then as you progress back up, you may be going to a club anywhere along the river. And so always asking and checking before you do any crossing over. Check with an umpire, make sure you've got acknowledgement. Yes, you can cross before you cross over, because that's when some of the biggest accidents can happen. So I think that's really, really important. I think
I
go,
was going
you
to say
go.
something about lights.
Ah, me too.
That's in our thing to bring and pack with you. You know, if you know you're going to have to row back, you know, there's a timing given. Lights on for the return of 5:56 at Women's Head. Make sure you've got the lights. It's so much easier for you to be seen, but for other people to kind of see you as well. It's going to help you navigate. It just keeps you safe. So those little things can be in your navigation packs, and it's going to help you out a lot.
Well, we wish everyone the best of luck for all of your racing. We've answered a few questions, but any more that you have, please do feel free to get in touch with us on our social media, or feel free to email us at thewinningcox@gmail.com.
Yeah, and I think don't forget to have fun. You know, we said we're not here to spook you. We're here so that you understand kind of the safety points and how the stream works and that side of things. But also, if you really understand these parts, these elements, that allows you to do something really cool down the racetrack. And that's what we want you to do. We want you to be in the best position to have the absolute race of your lives and enjoy it out there. And that's where kind of that coxing etiquette really comes in. Actually, you could draw a really good performance out of both yourself and somebody else that'll be of a higher caliber than if you went around and you lost that etiquette. So just have a blast out there and bring on the performances from everyone else.
And thanks so much for coming.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.